So, from Newsweek, woman found guilty of fatally infecting neighbor with COVID-19. A 54-year-old woman in Austria was found guilty of fatally infecting her neighbor with COVID-19 nearly 3 years ago, according to a Friday report. A judge sentenced the woman to 4 months suspended imprisonment and fined her $886 for grossly negligent homicide. The Associated Press reported that local media said the punishment was the second time the woman has received a pandemic-related conviction in a year. So this is what's going on right now. We'll get to it in a moment, but basically the claim is she met the woman in the stairway while she was sick with COVID. And that supposedly got her sick. They had an expert told the court that tests showed that the virus DNA matched both the victim and a 54-year-old woman. So they used this to claim that, yeah, she got the sickness from this woman and she died with COVID-19, I believe, as a comorbidity, as far as I remember. So that's enough. That's a negligent homicide. Grossly negligent homicide. If you leave your house with COVID in Austria, you might be convicted of negligent homicide. Interesting, right? I wonder how many other states might do something similar for the next pandemic. I think it's insane. I think it's completely unreasonable. It makes zero sense. Yeah, the AP said the victim was a cancer patient and died of pneumonia that was caused by the coronavirus. Right, she had pneumonia and cancer, but it's totally due to COVID, everything. How do you know that she had pneumonia due to COVID? How do you even know that the woman had COVID, considering everything you had is that a doctor reportedly told police that she had tested positive for COVID with a rapid test, which have a stupidly high rate of false positives, and indicated to him that she wouldn't be keeping herself inside despite having the virus. Now, the woman claims that the meeting in the stairwell never happened. Nobody cares. It's enough that she supposedly told her doctor. Her doctor says that she told him that she had a positive rapid test and that she wouldn't be keeping isolated. And that's enough. That's totally enough. Now, you might say that, well, they have the DNA test, the DNA of both the woman and the victim showing when they check the virus, right? The virus DNA matched both the victim and the 54-year-old woman. You don't even know who got it first or how they got it. If they live in the same apartment building, it could be from under the doors, the windows, maybe some central ventilation system. You have no indication that she actually did anything wrong. And besides, being sick and not being locked up in your house has not been declared a crime as far as I remember. Well, it used to be during the pandemic, but it was proven to be utterly ineffective to prevent the spread, because countries that did lock people up didn't have lower fatality, lower deaths than countries that didn't lock people in their homes, which is why it was abandoned. It is considered a mistake. I don't understand what exactly they are doing here, apart from trying to cow people into submission. And we shouldn't let them. We absolutely shouldn't let them. There should be a public outcry at things like this, because they're being ridiculous. They're being utterly illogical. This is... And I will give you in a moment an indication to just how illogical it is. The judge issued his sentence for the woman on Thursday. The verdict has not been finalized. Also reported that the defendant was convicted last summer for intentionally endangering people through communicable diseases in another COVID-related offense. For last year's conviction, she was reportedly given a sentence of 3 months suspended imprisonment but was acquitted of the more serious charge of grossly negligent homicide. I wonder what she did that is intentionally endangering people. Is it, well, you had a rapid test and you left the house? Because that's literally what you did here. According to the World Health Organization, Austria recorded over 6 million coronavirus cases during the pandemic and reported over 22,000 confirmed deaths due to COVID-19. We know that they called a lot of things COVID-19 deaths. I remember there were even people who died of a motorcycle accident, but they still had COVID-19, so they called it a COVID-19 death. Not necessarily in Austria, just I think it was in the US, was it? They had ridiculous standards for it. You might have 4 or 5 comorbidities, die with COVID, and still be called a COVID victim. Austria obviously had multiple countrywide lockdowns. They also had this going on here. Quote, I feel sorry for you personally. I think that something like this has probably happened hundreds of times. That's what the judge told the woman. But you are unlucky that an expert has determined with almost absolute certainty that it was an infection that came from you. Now, let's go here. This is an NBC News article. New California law reduces penalty for knowingly exposing someone to HIV. This is a 2017 article. HIV is a public health issue, not a criminal issue. Interesting. So knowingly spreading HIV to somebody should be a misdemeanor, punishable by 3 to 8 years in prison. Before the law, it was a felony. Now it was signed by Brown on October 6 and takes effect January 1, so long ago, many years ago. Changes this into a misdemeanor carrying a 6-month prison term, the same punishment as knowingly exposing someone to other communicable diseases. I'm sorry, but how exactly is passing someone in a stairwell the same as for HIV? You have to presumably exchange bodily fluids in some way, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. That is not the same as passing someone in a stairwell. It's not. And COVID-19 is essentially as bad as the flu. I believe that's the standard we set for it nowadays, in modern times. The science has evolved, and now we know that it's not much more dangerous than the flu. HIV, on the other hand, even if you survive, you will need treatment for the rest of your life. Expensive treatment that will degrade your health. HIV is not the same as COVID. So how come you get punished more for COVID than for HIV? Because COVID is something that the government used to push lockdowns, to push control. Vaccine passports, pretty much limited, restricted movement for everybody all the time. They wanted to pass more laws to give themselves more power and to take away your freedom because it's lucrative, because it makes their life easier, because it gives them more power over you. And COVID was used as an excuse. So the punishment has to be severe. On the other hand, HIV is at least publicly known, especially as something that the LGBTQIA+ or whatever they call themselves nowadays, mostly pass on. So they are a protected group. It's somehow racist or sexist or something, homophobic, something, to speak ill of them. To note that something that they do might have negative consequences. And I know it's not just them, but this is the public perception. Well, that would be homophobic, it's evil, so we can't do that. Quickly decriminalize it. I think, if anything, supposing that it's mostly passed by the LGBT whatever community, then it's actually to their detriment to reduce the penalty. Because they are the ones who are victimized by people passing it on, right? If it's mostly between them, if it's mostly within their community, then to reduce the penalty is to make them unsafe. Because it means that people would have to not think twice to pass something so dangerous and detrimental to them. Whereas if the penalty was high, people would be more careful and less likely to engage in activities that would pass a dangerous disease to somebody of that community. If anything, you're hurting them. But as usual, the actual result on the ground of government policy in the 2020s is the complete opposite of what it claims to do. If you pass a bill and you call it the Protect the Children Act, then probably it's going to hurt the children. And if you pass a bill and you try to supposedly protect the reputation of LGBT whatever, then you're going to hurt them instead. My opinion, personal opinion. I would very much like to hear from people who might be affected by this. Would you feel safer or less safe knowing that passing HIV on to you is now less serious of a crime? It's a misdemeanor, it's not a felony anymore. I wonder. And would you feel safe in your country if you knew that passing on COVID-19 or any other disease equally dangerous, which means not dangerous, unless you are either already suffering from comorbidities or very, very old, immunocompromised, something of the sort. And I'm not saying that that's not serious, but if you do adhere to one of these categories, then you should be careful instead of everybody else in the world being careful for your sake. It makes no sense to lock down literally everybody for the very small amount of people who are more vulnerable. If you are vulnerable, you are the one who should take precautions. And I'm not saying we shouldn't help you. I'm not saying don't help with healthcare or whatever for people who need it. I am saying, however, that we have never in the history of humanity quarantined the many for the few. We quarantined the few for the many. That makes sense. You can't just say the entire workforce stays home because someone might get hurt. If it saves just one life, you remember that? How many people died because they couldn't get the doctor's appointment and then they, for example, didn't discover in time that they had a terrible disease? Or, for example, people who lost their homes because they couldn't go to work, they couldn't make money, they couldn't pay the rent or the mortgage, stuff like that. I know for a fact that in the US they had a stupid system where people were not forced to pay rent anymore as some sort of special order from the president because of the lockdowns, but you still had to pay your mortgage to the bank. So if, for example, you bought, let's say, a house to rent to make money, and you were paying the mortgage through the rent, you had to pay mortgage to the bank. Your renter didn't have to pay rent to you. You lost the house. The bank foreclosed you. They took the house. Now they forced the guy to pay rent, and if they couldn't, they would be kicked to the streets. So essentially, they passed the house from you to the bank. They didn't help the person. That person was still kicked to the street eventually once you lost the house. But it's okay for the bank to kick the person to the house, the renter. It's not okay for you to kick the renter to the street. It makes no sense at all unless you are specifically trying to transfer wealth from the middle class to the banks and the rich, which is exactly what happened. Tell me that it was unintentional. Tell me that it was gross negligence. I don't believe you. Pull the other one. It's got bells on it. Anyway, that's enough for today from me. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.